Lisa Harper pressed her face against the cold metal window of the transport ship and stared at the planet below. Kepler 442b looked nothing like Earth. The continents were purple and green, with 3 moons hanging in the pink sky like giant pearls. She had never seen anything so beautiful or so frightening. "First time off Earth?" asked the pilot, a friendly blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. His name was impossible for Lisa to pronounce, so he told her to call him Captain Blue. "Yes, Lisa," whispered, her breath fogging the window. "I still can't believe I'm here." Captain Blue laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The Zentari Academy is the best school in the galaxy. You should be proud. Very few humans have ever been accepted." Lisa nodded, but she felt more scared than proud. She was 17 years old and had never been away from her family for more than a week. Now she was millions of miles from home, about to attend school with aliens who came from civilizations thousands of years more advanced than Earth. The transport ship began its descent through the atmosphere. Lisa watched as the alien landscape grew larger and more detailed. She could see massive cities with towers that reached toward the sky like crystal needles. Flying vehicles moved between the buildings like schools of fish swimming through an ocean of air. "There it is," Captain Blue pointed with one of his 4 hands. "The Zentari Academy." Lisa gasped. The school was enormous, bigger than any building she had ever seen on Earth. It was shaped like a spiral shell, with classroom pods connected by glowing bridges that seemed to float in the air. Gardens filled with strange, colorful plants surrounded. The main structure and waterfalls cascaded down the sides of the building like liquid silver. "How many students go there?" Lisa asked. "About 5,000, Captain Blue replied. "From every corner of the galaxy. You'll meet beings you never imagined could exist." The ship landed on a platform that extended from the main building. Lisa gathered her few belongings and followed Captain Blue to the exit. The moment she stepped outside, she was hit by the alien air. It smelled like flowers and rain and something else she couldn't identify. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making her feel like she might float away at any moment. "Lisa Harper?" a voice called her name. She turned to see a tall, thin alien approaching. The being had pale green skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond measure. "I am Administrator Kelani. Welcome to the Zentari Academy." Lisa shook the administrator's hand, noticing how warm and soft it felt despite looking so different from human skin. "Thank you for accepting me," she said. "The pleasure is ours," Administrator Kelani replied. "You are only the 3rd human ever to attend our school. We are very curious to see what your species can contribute to our learning environment." They walked through the academy grounds, past fountains that played music as the water danced, and trees that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Other students moved along the pathways, and Lisa tried not to stare at the incredible variety of beings around her. There was a group of crystalline creatures whose bodies sparkled like living diamonds. They moved with precise, calculated steps, and spoke in chiming tones that sounded like bells. Administrator Kelani explained that they were from the Silicon Collective, a civilization that had merged their consciousness with their technology centuries ago. A gaseous being floated past, its form shifting between different colors like a living aurora. "That's one of the nebula dwellers," the administrator said. "They communicate through color and have no solid form. Very advanced in energy manipulation." Lisa watched in amazement as a group of heavily muscled humanoids marched by in perfect formation. They wore armor that seemed to be made of living metal, and their eyes glowed with fierce intelligence. "The Korathi," Administrator Kelani explained. "A warrior race that has conquered 3 star systems through superior military technology and strategy." "And I'm supposed to keep up with all of them?" Lisa asked, feeling smaller with each passing moment. "Intelligence comes in many forms," the administrator said kindly. "That is why we established this exchange program. Each species brings something unique to our understanding of the universe." They reached Lisa's dormitory, a comfortable room with a bed, desk, and a window that looked out over the academy gardens. The furniture had been specially designed for human proportions, which made Lisa feel a little less out of place. "Your classes begin tomorrow," Administrator Kalani said. "You will be taking advanced quantum mechanics with Dr. Vexhai. He is one of our most respected professors." After the administrator left, Lisa unpacked her few belongings. She had brought some photos of her family, a few books, and a small stuffed animal she had owned since childhood. Looking at these familiar objects in her alien surroundings made her feel homesick and excited at the same time. That evening, Lisa ate dinner in the Academy's main dining hall. The room was vast, with tables arranged in clusters throughout the space. She got her food from a device that somehow knew exactly what nutrients her human body needed and prepared a meal that tasted surprisingly similar to food from Earth. She sat alone at a small table, watching the other students interact. The crystalline beings sat together, their bodies pulsing with light as they communicated in their chiming language. The gaseous nebula dwellers floated in a loose group, their forms shifting through a rainbow of colors. The HFY warriors sat in rigid lines, eating their meals with military precision. A few students glanced in her direction, and Lisa could sense their curiosity. She was clearly different from everyone else, smaller and softer looking than most of the beings around her. She heard whispers in languages she couldn't understand, but the tone was clear enough. They were talking about the primitive human who had somehow gotten into their advanced school. Lisa finished her meal quickly and returned to her room. She tried to review her notes for tomorrow's quantum mechanics class, but the material was unlike anything she had studied on Earth. The mathematics involved concepts that human science was only beginning to understand. She wondered if she had made a terrible mistake coming here. The next morning, Lisa woke early and made her way to Dr. Vexhai's classroom. The professor was already there, preparing for the day's lesson. He was a massive insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His exoskeleton was a deep purple color, and his movements were sharp and precise. "You must be the human," Dr. Vexhai said without looking up from his work. His voice was harsh and clicking like the sound of machinery. "I suppose you think you belong here." Lisa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I'll do my best to keep up, Professor." "Your best," Dr. Vexhai repeated, his mandibles clicking with what Lisa realized was amusement. How charming. "Child, your species has barely learned to leave your own planet. The other students in this class come from civilizations that mastered faster-than-light travel when your ancestors were still living in caves." Other students began to enter the classroom. Lisa recognized some of them from the dining hall. Kethmer, one of the crystalline beings, took a seat near the front. His body sparkled with embedded computational devices that could process information faster than any human brain. Zaralyn, a nebula dweller, floated to her position, her gaseous form shifting to a deep blue that Lisa had learned indicated intellectual superiority. Jorik, a HFY warrior, sat with perfect posture, his armor humming with built-in technology. They all stared at Lisa with barely concealed contempt. She was the primitive among gods, the savage among scholars. Dr. Vexhai's compound eyes fixed on her with obvious disdain. "Take your seat, Miss Harper," the professor said. "Try not to slow down the class too much. We have important work to do, and I won't have it interrupted by the limitations of an underdeveloped mind." Lisa sat down at the back of the classroom, feeling the weight of every alien gaze upon her. She opened her notebook and prepared to take notes, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether she belonged here, or if she was just a mistake that would soon be corrected. The adventure was just beginning, and Lisa Harper was about to discover that sometimes the most primitive mind can see things that the most advanced intellects miss entirely. 3 weeks had passed since Lisa Harper first entered Dr. Vexhai's quantum mechanics classroom. Every day had been a struggle. The professor made no effort to hide his belief that humans were too primitive to understand advanced science. He spoke in technical terms that her alien classmates absorbed easily, while Lisa frantically took notes and tried to keep up. The crystalline student, Kethmer, often answered questions before Dr. Vexhai even finished asking them. His body would pulse with light as computational matrices in his structure processed complex equations in seconds. Zaralyn, the gaseous nebula dweller, communicated her answers through rapid color changes that the professor could read like text. Jorik, the Korathi warrior, approached every problem with the same methodical precision his people used in battle. Lisa sat in the back row, feeling more lost with each passing day. She had been the best student in her physics classes on Earth, but here she felt like a child trying to understand adult conversations. The mathematics involved concepts that human science was only beginning to explore. Her textbooks were filled with equations that seemed to shift and change before her eyes. Today we will examine the most challenging problem in dimensional engineering, Dr. Vexhai announced on a Tuesday morning. His compound eyes swept across the classroom, lingering on Lisa with obvious disdain. The Karthik paradox has puzzled the greatest minds in the galaxy for over 300 years. Lisa looked up from her notebook. She had read about the Karthik paradox in her preparation materials, but the explanation had been far beyond her understanding. Something about creating stable wormholes through 11-dimensional space, while accounting for gravitational interference from massive objects. The mathematics alone required processing power that exceeded anything available on Earth. The paradox, Dr. Vexhai continued, involves the fundamental problem of maintaining wormhole stability. Every time we solve for one-dimensional variable, another becomes unstable. It is like trying to hold water in a basket made of holes. Kethmer's crystalline form sparkled as he raised one of his geometric appendages. Professor, the Silicon Collective has been working on this problem for decades. Our most advanced computational matrices have identified 17 potential solution paths, but each one creates new paradoxes. Correct, Dr. Vexhai replied, his mandibles clicking with approval. The nebula dwellers have approached it through energy manipulation. The Korathi through brute force calculations, and dozens of other civilizations have contributed their finest minds. Yet the paradox remains unsolved. Zaralyn's gaseous form shifted to a deep orange, indicating intense thought. The problem seems to be that 11-dimensional mathematics becomes unstable when consciousness interacts with the field equations, but we have never understood why. Lisa scribbled notes, frantically trying to follow the conversation. Her alien classmates were discussing concepts that represented the cutting edge of galactic science, while she was still learning basic principles. She felt like she was drowning in an ocean of knowledge that was far too deep for her human mind. Dr. Vexhai activated a holographic display in the center of the classroom. The Karthik paradox appeared as a three-dimensional equation that rotated slowly in the air. Variables shifted and changed as the equation moved, creating patterns that were both beautiful and terrifying. Lisa stared at it, feeling overwhelmed by its complexity. This equation represents the collective work of thousands of the galaxy's finest, the professor said. It is a monument to advanced thinking, something that requires the highest level of intellectual development to even comprehend. His compound eyes turned toward Lisa, and she felt her stomach drop. She could see the cruel intention in his gaze, the way his mandibles clicked with anticipation. He was planning something that would humiliate her in front of the entire class. Miss Harper, Dr. Vexhai said, his voice carrying across the silent classroom. Perhaps you would like to contribute to our discussion of this advanced problem. Lisa felt her cheeks burn red. Every alien eye in the room turned toward her. Kethmer's crystalline body pulsed with what she had learned was barely contained laughter. Zaralyn shifted to a deep purple, indicating cruel amusement. Jorik's armor hummed quietly as he turned to watch the spectacle. I'm not sure I understand the problem well enough yet. Professor, Lisa said quietly, hoping he would move on to another student. Nonsense, Dr. Vexhai replied, his voice dripping with false encouragement. Surely the representative of Earth can offer some insight into a problem that has challenged our greatest minds. After all, humans are supposed to be intelligent, are they not? The other students made sounds that Lisa recognized as alien laughter. She felt smaller and more out of place than ever. She wanted to disappear, to melt into her chair and never be seen again. "Come to the front, Miss Harper," Dr. Vexhai commanded. "Let us see what the primitive human mind can contribute to advanced galactic science." Lisa's legs felt weak as she stood up. The walk to the front of the classroom seemed to take forever. She could hear whispers behind her in languages she didn't understand, but the tone was clear. They were all waiting to see her fail. The holographic equation loomed before her, its variables shifting and changing in patterns that hurt her eyes. To follow, she had never seen anything so complex, so utterly beyond her comprehension. The mathematics involved concepts that human science wouldn't discover for centuries. "We are waiting," Dr. Vexhai said, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "Surely you have some thoughts on how to solve a problem that has stumped civilizations far more advanced than your own." Lisa stared at the equation, feeling panic rise in her chest. She could hear her heart beating in her ears. The room felt too hot, too bright. She was about to become a laughingstock in front of beings whose ancestors had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. I don't know where to start," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course you don't," Dr. Vexhai replied, his voice full of mock sympathy. "This is what happens when primitive minds attempt to understand advanced concepts. Perhaps Earth should reconsider sending representatives to institutions designed for truly intelligent beings." Kethmar's body sparkled with bright pulses of light. Zarlin's form shifted through a spectrum of colors that Lisa recognized as extreme amusement. Jorik's armor hummed with what sounded like approval of the professor's words. "The human cannot even begin to comprehend the problem," Dr. Vexhai continued, turning to address the class. "This is why some species remain confined to single planets, while others explore the galaxy. Intelligence is not equally distributed among all beings." Lisa felt tears threatening to spill from her eyes. She had never been so humiliated in her life. Every alien in the room was looking at her with pity or contempt. She was the primitive human who had somehow stumbled into a place where she didn't belong. "Perhaps," Dr. Vexhai said, his voice carrying a tone of finality, "Miss Harper would be more comfortable in a basic mathematics class with the younger students. This level of science is clearly beyond her species' capability." The classroom erupted in what Lisa could only describe as alien laughter. Different species expressed amusement in different ways, but the meaning was universal. She was the joke, the primitive creature who had dared to think she could compete with advanced civilizations. Lisa stood frozen before the impossible equation, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. She had never felt so alone, so out of place. The dream of representing humanity among the stars was turning into a nightmare of embarrassment and failure, but as she stared at the shifting variables of the Karthek paradox, something began to change in her mind. The panic started to fade, replaced by a different kind of thinking. She stopped trying to solve the problem like her alien classmates would. Instead, she began to see the equation not as a mathematical puzzle, but as something else entirely. Something that her human brain, evolved for different purposes, might understand in a way that pure logic could not. The humiliation was far from over. But Lisa Harper was about to discover that sometimes the most primitive approach could see things that the most advanced minds had missed. Lisa Harper stood before the holographic equation, her face burning with shame. The alien laughter echoed around her like a cruel symphony. Dr. Vexhai's compound eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched her struggle. The Karthek paradox rotated slowly in the air, its 11-dimensional mathematics shifting and changing in patterns that seemed to mock her human limitations. "We are still waiting, Miss Harper," the professor said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "Surely you have some primitive insight to offer." Lisa felt the weight of every alien gaze upon her. Kethmar's crystalline body pulsed with barely contained laughter. Zarlin had shifted to a deep purple color that indicated cruel enjoyment. Jorik's armor hummed quietly as he watched the spectacle with obvious approval. For a moment, Lisa wanted to run. She wanted to flee from the classroom, from the academy, from this entire alien world where she clearly didn't belong. The equation? Before her was impossibly complex, involving mathematics that human science wouldn't understand for centuries. How could she possibly solve something that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy? But then something changed. As Lisa stared at the shifting variables, her mind began to work differently. Instead of trying to understand the equation the way her alien classmates would, she stopped thinking like a mathematician. She stopped trying to process the information with pure logic and computational power. Lisa had grown up reading stories. She had spent countless hours imagining impossible worlds, creating characters in her mind, and seeing patterns in random events. Her human brain was built for narrative, for finding connections between seemingly unrelated things. And as she looked at the Karthik paradox, she began to see it not as a mathematical problem, but as a story. "Professor," Lisa said quietly, her voice barely audible above the whispers of her classmates, "can I ask you something about this equation?" "Doctor." Vexhi's mandibles clicked with irritation. What could you possibly ask that would be relevant to a problem of this complexity? "What if we're making the wrong assumptions?" Lisa asked, her voice growing stronger. "What if the problem exists because we're thinking about space-time in the wrong way?" The professor's compound eyes narrowed. "The assumptions are based on thousands of years of scientific research by the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Are you suggesting that your primitive species knows something that we do not?" Lisa felt her face grow hot, but she pressed on. "Not exactly. But what if what if space-time isn't just a thing that exists? What if it's something that responds to consciousness?" The classroom fell silent. Even the whispers stopped. "Doctor." Vexhi stared at her with what might have been surprise or anger. Kethmer's crystalline form stopped pulsing, its computational matrices suddenly still. Zaralin's gaseous body shifted to a neutral gray color. "Explain," Dr. Vexhi said, his voice cold and sharp. Lisa took a deep breath. She was about to say something that would either revolutionize galactic science or make her look even more foolish than she already did. "On Earth, we have this thing called imagination. We see patterns in clouds, faces in rock formations, stories in random events. We don't just process information. We create meaning from chaos." She moved closer to the holographic equation, her hands trembling slightly. What if the Karthik paradox exists because consciousness and space-time are connected in ways we don't understand? What if the universe isn't just a machine that follows mathematical rules, but something that actually responds to the minds trying to understand it? Jorik leaned forward in his seat, his armor humming with increased activity. "Are you suggesting that the universe is alive?" "Not alive exactly," Lisa replied, her confidence growing as her human mind began to make connections that pure logic couldn't see. "But maybe interactive, maybe consciousness doesn't just observe reality, maybe it participates in creating it." Dr. Vexhi's mandibles clicked rapidly. "This is absurd. You are suggesting that the fundamental nature of physics changes based on who is observing it. But what if it does?" Lisa asked. "What if that's why the paradox exists? All these advanced civilizations have been trying to solve it with pure mathematics, treating space-time like a dead thing that just sits there following rules. But what if space-time is more like a conversation partner?" She reached out and touched the holographic controls, her human intuition guiding her fingers. The equation began to shift and change, but not in the rigid mathematical way that her alien classmates would approach it. Lisa was treating the variables like characters in a story, like elements that could interact and influence each other in unexpected ways. "You're anthropomorphizing the mathematics," Kethmore said, his crystalline body beginning to pulse with what Lisa recognized as confusion mixed with curiosity. "You're treating dimensional variables as if they have personalities." "Maybe they do," Lisa replied, her hands dancing through the holographic display. "Maybe that's what we've been missing. Maybe the universe isn't just a collection of objects following laws. Maybe it's a living system that changes based on how consciousness interacts with it." The equation began to respond to her touch in ways that defied conventional mathematics. Variables that should have remained stable started to flow and shift. Dimensional constants that had been treated as fixed began to fluctuate in patterns. That seemed almost organic. Dr. Vexhai moved closer, his compound eyes focused intently on Lisa's work. This is not how mathematics works. You cannot simply ignore fundamental constants. But what if they're not really constant? Lisa asked, what if they're more like ... guidelines? What if consciousness can influence them through intention and understanding? She was working entirely on instinct now, her human brain making connections that her alien classmates couldn't see. Where they saw rigid mathematical relationships, she saw fluid interactions. Where they saw fixed laws, she saw possibilities for negotiation. The other students watched in growing amazement as Lisa's unconventional approach began to produce results. The equation was stabilizing in ways that traditional methods had never achieved. Variables that had been chaotic were finding balance. Dimensional relationships that had been paradoxical were resolving into harmony. This is impossible, Zarlin said, her gaseous form shifting through rapid color changes that indicated deep confusion. The mathematics should not work this way. Maybe. Math isn't the whole story, Lisa replied, her hands continuing to work through the holographic display. Maybe consciousness is part of the equation too. Maybe the universe requires both logic and imagination to fully understand it. As she worked, Lisa felt something that her alien classmates had never experienced. She felt like the universe was responding to her, like space-time itself was collaborating with her human mind to find a solution. It was as if the cosmos had been waiting for someone to approach it not as a problem to be solved, but as a mystery to be experienced. The Karthik paradox began to transform before their eyes. The chaotic, contradictory mathematics were reorganizing themselves into something beautiful and elegant. The equation was no longer fighting against itself, but flowing like music, like poetry, like a story that finally made sense. Dr. Vexhai stood motionless, his mandibles clicking so rapidly they created a continuous buzz. His compound eyes were fixed on Lisa's work with an expression that might have been shock, anger, or something else entirely. How? He whispered. How is this possible? Lisa looked up from the holographic display, her face flushed with excitement and exhaustion. I don't know, I just thought. I stopped trying to force the universe to make sense on our terms. I started trying to understand it on its own terms. The equation continued to stabilize, its variables finding balance through Lisa's intuitive approach. She had not just solved the Karthik paradox. She had revolutionized the entire understanding of how consciousness interacts with reality. The classroom remained silent as the implications of what they had witnessed began to sink in. The primitive human had not just embarrassed herself. She had potentially changed the course of galactic science forever, and Lisa Harper, 17 years old and millions of miles from home, was just beginning to understand that sometimes the most advanced minds in the galaxy needed to learn from the most primitive approaches to truly comprehend the universe. The holographic equation floating before Lisa Harper had transformed into something entirely new. What had once been a chaotic mass of contradictory mathematics was now flowing like a river of light. The variables moved in harmony, creating patterns that were both beautiful and functional. The Karthik paradox was no longer a paradox at all. Dr. Vexhai stood frozen, his compound eyes wide with disbelief. His mandibles had stopped clicking, leaving the classroom in an eerie silence. The professor, who had spent decades studying the most complex problems in galactic science, was watching a 17-year-old human solve something that had stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy. This cannot be correct, he whispered, his voice barely audible. The mathematics, they should not work this way. Lisa stepped back from the holographic display, her hands trembling with exhaustion and excitement. She had been working on pure instinct, following patterns that her human mind could see but not fully explain. The equation before her was stable, elegant, and completely unlike anything that traditional galactic science had ever produced. But it is working, she said quietly. Look at the dimensional relationships. They're balanced. The wormhole geometry is stable. The gravitational interference from massive objects is being compensated for automatically? Kethmer's crystalline body was pulsing with rapid light patterns as his computational matrices tried to process what they were seeing. The solution is organic, he said, his voice filled with wonder. The mathematics are alive. They respond to consciousness in ways we never imagined possible. Zaralin's gaseous form was shifting through colors that Lisa had never seen before. The nebula dweller was experiencing emotions that her species had no names for. How did you know to approach it this way? She asked, her voice carrying tones of respect that had been completely absent just minutes before. I didn't know, Lisa admitted. I just I saw it differently. Where you saw equations, I saw relationships. Where you saw constants, I saw possibilities. I treated the universe like it was something I could talk to instead of something I had to force into submission. Jorek stood up from his seat, his armor humming with increased activity. The Karathi warrior had been trained to recognize tactical brilliance, and what he was witnessing went far beyond simple problem-solving. You have changed the fundamental understanding of how consciousness interacts with reality, he said, his voice carrying the respect of one warrior for another. This is not just a solution to a mathematical problem. This is a revolution in thinking. Dr. Vexhai moved closer to the holographic display, his forearms reaching out to manipulate the equation from different angles. Every test he performed confirmed what his eyes were telling him. The human had not just solved the Karthik paradox. She had done something that should have been impossible. The implications, he muttered, his mandibles beginning to click again as his mind raced through possibilities. If consciousness can influence the fundamental structure of space-time, then everything we thought we knew about physics is incomplete. Lisa watched as her alien classmates began to understand what had happened. The beings who had looked at her with contempt and pity just hours before were now staring at her with something that looked like awe. She had not just proven herself worthy of being in their classroom. She had shown them something about the universe that their advanced civilizations had never discovered. Professor, Lisa said, her voice stronger now that she had found her confidence. What if this is why Earth was chosen for the exchange program? What if humanity brings something to galactic science that the other species can't provide? Doctor. Vexhai's compound eyes focused on her with new intensity. Explain. All of your civilizations developed along similar paths, Lisa continued. You became more logical, more mathematical, more focused on pure computation. But humans evolved differently. We stayed connected to imagination, to storytelling, to seeing patterns in chaos. Maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe that's exactly what the universe needs. The professor began to pace around the holographic equation, his mind working through the implications of what Lisa was suggesting. You are proposing that consciousness and reality are fundamentally connected. That the universe requires both logical analysis and intuitive understanding to reveal its secrets. Not just proposing, Lisa said, gesturing to the stable equation floating before them. Proving. This solution works because it treats the universe as a living system instead of a dead machine. It works because it acknowledges that consciousness is part of the equation, not separate from it. Kethmer's crystalline body was now pulsing with steady, rhythmic light. My people have always believed that consciousness could be reduced to computation, he said. But what you have shown us suggests that consciousness is something more, something that cannot be calculated or programmed. Maybe that's why the paradox existed in the first place, Lisa replied. Maybe it was the universe's way of saying that pure logic isn't enough. Maybe it was waiting for someone to approach it with both intelligence and imagination. Zaralin floated closer to the holographic display, her gaseous form shifting to colors that indicated deep thought and growing excitement. The energy patterns in your solution are unlike anything we have seen before. They pulse with rhythms that seem almost musical, as if the mathematics are singing. Maybe they are, Lisa said with a smile. Maybe that's what we've been missing all along. Maybe the universe isn't just a collection of objects following laws. Maybe it's a symphony and we've been trying to understand it by studying individual notes instead of listening to the whole song. Dr. Vexhai stopped pacing and turned to face Lisa directly. Miss Harper, do you realize what you have done? You have not just solved a mathematical problem. You have potentially changed the course of galactic civilization. Lisa felt a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. I just saw the problem differently. I approached it the way a human would, instead of trying to think like an alien. And that, the professor said, his voice carrying a tone of wonder, may be the most important discovery in the history of science. We have spent millennia trying to understand the universe through pure logic, through mathematical precision, through computational power. But you have shown us that consciousness itself is part of the equation, that reality responds to the mind that observes it. The other students began to gather around the holographic display, studying Lisa's solution with new eyes. What had started as an attempt to humiliate the primitive human had become a moment of revelation that would change everything they thought they knew about the nature of existence. The Galactic Science Council will want to study this immediately, Dr. Vexhai sighed, his mandibles clicking with excitement. This changes everything. Every equation, every theory, every assumption we have made about the nature of reality. Lisa looked around the classroom at her alien classmates. The beings who had laughed at her just minutes before were now looking at her with respect, curiosity, and something that might have been friendship. She had not just proven that humans belonged in the galaxy. She had shown that they were necessary. Professor, she said quietly, I think I'm going to like it here after all. Dr. Vexhai's compound eyes seemed to sparkle with something that might have been pride. Miss Harper, I believe you are going to revolutionize the way we understand the universe. And I can think of no greater honor than to be the professor who witnessed the moment when a young human taught the galaxy that consciousness and reality are partners in the dance of existence. The equation continued to pulse with stable energy, its variables flowing in harmony like a perfect song. Lisa Harper had not just solved the Karthik paradox. She had opened the door to a new age of understanding, where logic and imagination would work together to unlock the deepest secrets of the cosmos. The primitive human had become the teacher, and the advanced civilizations of the galaxy had become her students. And in that moment, everything changed. 2 weeks had passed since Lisa Harper solved the Karthik paradox, and the Zentari Academy was buzzing with excitement. News of her breakthrough had spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Scientists from every corner of known space were requesting copies of her solution, trying to understand how a 17-year-old human had accomplished what their greatest minds could not. Lisa sat in the Academy's central garden, reading messages from Earth on her communication device. Her family was proud but confused. Her mother had written, "We always knew you were special, honey, but we never imagined you would change the entire galaxy." Her father had added, "Come home safe and maybe explain this whole thing to us in simple terms." "Miss Harper?" a familiar voice called out. Lisa looked up to see Dr. Vexhai approaching. The professor who had once tried to humiliate her now carried himself differently around her. His compound eyes held respect instead of contempt, and his mandibles clicked with what she had learned was excitement rather than cruel amusement. "Hello, Professor," Lisa said, putting down her communication device. "How are the test results coming along?" Dr. Vexhai settled beside her on the garden bench, his forearms folding in a gesture of relaxation. "Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. We have tested your solution on 17 different theoretical wormhole scenarios, and it works perfectly every time. The mathematics adapt to each new situation like a living organism." Lisa smiled. "That's because they are alive, in a way. That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. The universe isn't just a machine following rules. It's more like a conversation partner that responds to how we approach it." "Yes," the professor said, his voice filled with wonder. "We are beginning to understand that now." The Galactic Science Council has formed a special committee to study the implications of consciousness-responsive mathematics. They want to call it the Harper effect, Lisa felt her cheeks grow warm. They want to name it after me? Of course, Dr. Vexhai replied. You discovered it. But more importantly, you have shown us that intelligence comes in many forms. For too long, we have believed that logical thinking and computational power were the highest forms of intelligence. You have taught us that imagination and intuition are equally important. Across the garden, Lisa could see her former classmates studying together. Kethmer's crystalline body was pulsing with gentle light as he worked through problems with a new approach that included creative thinking alongside pure computation. Zaralan was experimenting with color patterns that expressed emotional responses to mathematical concepts. Jorik was applying strategic imagination to engineering problems, treating them like battles that required both tactics and inspiration. They're all different now, Lisa observed. More guy human, I suppose. Not more human, Dr. Vexhai corrected. More complete. Your approach has shown them that they were only using half their potential. Logic without imagination is like trying to fly with one wing. It can keep you in the air, but you cannot soar. A chime from the Academy's communication system interrupted their conversation. Administrator Kalani's voice echoed across the garden. Miss Harper, please report to the main administrative building. You have visitors from the Galactic Council. Lisa felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. What do they want? To offer you the opportunity of a lifetime, Dr. Vexhai said, his mandibles clicking with excitement. But I will let them tell you themselves. The walk to the administrative building felt longer than usual. Lisa had grown comfortable at the academy, but the idea of meeting with the leaders of galactic civilization made her feel like the scared teenager she had been when she first arrived. What if they expected her to solve more impossible problems? What if her success with the Karthak paradox had been just luck? Administrator Kelani met her at the entrance, her pale green face glowing with pride. Lisa, I want you to know how proud we are of what you have accomplished. You have brought great honor to both Earth and the Zentari Academy. They walked through corridors that Lisa had never seen before, past rooms filled with holographic displays showing star charts and mathematical equations. Finally, they reached a conference room where three beings waited around a circular table. The first was a tall, elegant creature with silver skin and eyes like liquid starlight. The second was a being made entirely of living energy, its form shifting and flowing like captured lightning. The third was a massive, ancient-looking entity with stone-like skin and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of millennia. Miss Harper, the silver-skinned being said, rising to greet her. I am Counselor Zephyrin of the Galactic Science Council. These are my colleagues, Energy Form Veltara and Ancient Thokmar. We have come to speak with you about your remarkable discovery. Lisa took a seat across from them, trying to calm her racing heart. I'm honored to meet you all. Though I'm not sure I understand why my solution is causing such a stir. My child, Ancient Thokmar said, his voice deep and resonant. Like the sound of mountain avalanches, you have not simply solved a mathematical problem. You have revealed a fundamental truth about the nature of existence itself. You have shown us that consciousness and reality are partners in the dance of creation. Energy form Veltara pulsed with colors that Lisa somehow understood represented excitement and joy. For millions of years, the species of this galaxy have pursued knowledge through logic and computation alone. We believed that the universe was a machine to be understood through analysis and calculation. But you have shown us that it is something far more wonderful. It is alive, Counselor Zephyrin continued. Not alive in the way that organic beings are alive, but alive in the sense that it responds to consciousness, that it participates in its own understanding. This changes everything about how we approach science, philosophy, and our relationship with existence itself. Lisa felt overwhelmed by the implications of what they were telling her. So what happens now? Now, Ancient Thokmar said, we invite Earth to join the Galactic Council as a full member. Not as a junior partner learning from more advanced civilizations, but as an equal contributor to our understanding of the universe. But Earth is so young, Lisa protested. We've barely learned to travel between stars. How can we be equals with civilizations that have existed for millions of years? Because, energy form Veltara pulsed, age does not equal wisdom. Your species has preserved something that we lost long ago in our pursuit of pure logic. You have kept the ability to dream, to imagine, to see patterns where others see only chaos. This is not primitive thinking. This is a form of intelligence that we desperately need. Counselor Zephyrin leaned forward. We are also proposing the establishment of human integration centers throughout the galaxy, places where beings from all species can learn to think the way humans do, to approach problems with both logic and imagination. You want to teach aliens to think like humans? Lisa asked, amazed. We want to teach all species to think more completely, Ancient Thokmar replied. Your people have shown us that consciousness is not just a tool for understanding the universe. It is a partner in creating reality itself. This is knowledge that every intelligent being should possess. Lisa looked around the room at these powerful beings who had traveled across the galaxy to speak with her. Just weeks ago, she had been a scared teenager who felt out of place among advanced alien civilizations. Now she was being offered the chance to help reshape the galaxy's understanding of existence itself. There is one more thing, Counselor Zephyrin said. We would like you to serve as the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council. You would represent your species and help guide the integration of human thinking into galactic science. Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes. I'm just a kid from Earth. I don't know if I'm ready for something like that. You solved the Karthek paradox. Energy form Veltara pulsed with warm colors. You revolutionized our understanding of consciousness and reality. You showed beings from across the galaxy that there are many ways to be intelligent. If you are not ready, then no one is. Lisa thought about her home, about her family, about the scared girl who had stepped off the transport ship just weeks ago. Then she thought about the galaxy, about all the problems that might be solved if different species learned to think together, combining logic with imagination, computation with creativity. I accept, she said, her voice strong and clear. I'll do whatever I can to help. The three council members made sounds and gestures that Lisa recognized as expressions of joy and approval. She had become more than just a student or even a problem solver. She had become a bridge between different ways of thinking, a translator between logic and imagination. As Lisa left the conference room, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was no longer just representing herself or even just Earth. She was representing a new way of understanding the universe, an approach that honored both the precision of mathematics and the creativity of consciousness. The scared teenager who had once stood humiliated before an impossible equation had become the ambassador for a new age of galactic cooperation. And as she walked back through the Academy gardens, Lisa Harper knew that her real adventure was just beginning.